changes you see?
In the 80s, when I was studying therapy, in schools, there were very few approaches that were being taught. As I was finishing my graduate training and then starting to teach doctoral students, in the United States particularly, we got more into what were called the evidence-based approaches. And people were integrating different approaches together for particular problems. And the insurance companies in the United States were reimbursing therapy only for certain kinds of problems. And so the research that got done was on those kinds of problems, and it just kind of snowballed. That if you were treating somebody who wanted to use insurance to help pay for the therapy, and everybody in the United States wants to do that. I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in the United States, that's the case. It had to be for a certain problem. They couldn't just come in and say, I'm unhappy, or I have a communication problem in my marriage.
They had to have some form of diagnosis to even get treatment. Okay.
Exactly. And so that fed into the research, because research has to have funding. And the organizations that fund research are mostly through the government, and some big foundations. But again, they wanted to treat certain problems. And they were looking for a particular approach that everybody could use as a therapist with a particular problem and a particular client, and it would fix it. And it was a very narrow way of thinking. And it just got narrower and narrower and narrower. More and more models were developed. We have, I don't know, last time I read it was more than 400, and that was several years ago. So there's,
all for particular problems.
Hundreds. Most of them for particular problems, but not always. Not always. A lot of them are applying a particular model to different kinds of problems. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, solution-focused therapy. So people begin to get this idea that you have to use an approach in a particular way in order to help people who describe a particular problem. So that's a huge change, because at first, in my training as a family therapist, the idea was that we were focusing on the process of communications among people rather than the content of their talk. And we could apply that paradigm to many different kinds of problems. And I believe that's true of solution focus. But because of insurance and because of research, and because this is what happens, people want to learn the best way to treat trauma. So now there's a lot of competition. Trauma, for example. What's the best way to treat trauma? EMDR, eye movement desensitization and something therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or medical therapy, drugs, or combinations. They're still sort of searching for the holy grail of fixing everything with one magic wand. I'm beginning to see that opening up, and I think that it will, because in the United States, the government funding through the National Institutes for Mental Health are no longer using those mental health diagnoses to decide who gets money. They have announced that the new Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is not going to be used anymore for diagnosing. And I think it's going to require a period of transition where people don't know what to do. Because it's like, well, I want to treat depression. Well, you have to come up with descriptions of depression and treat the symptoms. And there will be people who say, no, we can't treat symptoms because we have to treat the underlying problems. We have to treat the trauma from childhood, or we have to treat the distorted thinking, or whatever their idea of the cause is. So I think we're going to go through a transition time, and I don't know what's going to come out on the other side.
Do you think it's positive or not?
Well, I think it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be very uncomfortable. But my hope is that in the future, we will find a way that therapists can make a living and do therapy the way that they think it works best. Because one of my beliefs is that the approach matters less than the fit between the therapist and what they are doing. Mm-hmm. So in a research project, I asked the therapist at the end of the project, are you using the approach in your own therapy now? And she said, oh, no, I never liked it. And so I thought, well, that accounts for how it is that it didn't work very well for your clients. So I think that's important. Of course, I will continue to try to help people learn solution focus and see it as what I think of as the best way to think about helping people. But I accept the fact that for some people, that will never be true because they'll try the techniques, but they won't believe in the assumptions, and so it won't be helpful. They'll do other things. But I do hope that in the long run, we can understand that the kinds of things that people come to us as therapists for are not medical problems, that there are certainly medical aspects to their problems, and that those need to be addressed sometimes. But especially when we know that medication for mental concerns work only about half the time, and then even less because the side effects are so bad that people quit taking them, that we're going to have to continue to find other ways of helping them. Mm-hmm. And so my hope is that we can just see people as people, not as pathologies, mm-hmm. and help them with what they want help with, not what we think they want help with, mm-hmm. or what they should want help with. It's a dream.
Yeah.
It's a dream. It'll never come completely true. For example, teachers want children to behave in school the way they want them to behave. And when they don't behave in the way they want them to behave, then they send them for a medication. And I really don't like that. I think children can be children and can learn without medication. So, but I think it's going to be a good thing. I think that the change in the DSM-5 has enough backlash now that more and more people are going to say, I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. It's just not. It's not a good thing.